All my life, I've always been invisible in my own family. I got used to being compared, used to the condescending looks every time my brother showed up, the one everyone saw as the perfect example, the person all the praise was reserved for. I thought I could endure it, until that night at his engagement party. Amid the laughter, the sparkling lights, and the clinking of wine glasses, he deliberately humiliated me in front of our relatives, his friends, and the person I once loved. In that moment, I no longer felt pain. There was only one thought lingering in my mind. It was time for them to finally see who I really was. And when I spoke, there was no turning back. Before we dive into today's dramatic and unexpected story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. And leave a comment to let us know where you're watching from. Now let's move on together to a bitter, calculating tale filled with shocking twists that will send chills down everyone's spine. I am Nora Callahan, and I am 31 years old. My life has been a quiet canvas, painted in the shadow of my brother Julian, who is 36 years old and has always been the sun that our family revolves around. Julian's brilliance from my early years cast a glow so fierce that I was barely visible, a faint star struggling for recognition. That night at his engagement gala, when he raised his crystal flute and made a toast that cut through my dignity, something inside of me was shattered, a dam breaking under years of pressure. I hadn't planned to reveal my secret that night, but as his arrogant eyes met mine, a fire ignited, and I knew it was time to rewrite the story he had written for me. This is the story of how Nora forged my path not with retribution, but with a truth too long, buried a truth that would shift the earth beneath us all. Our parents, Thomas and Eleanor, created a stable middle-class life in our small Boston suburb, and their pride was a lighthouse beaming on Julian from the moment he brought home a perfect report card at the age of 7. I was too young to compete, but old enough to feel the warmth of their attention tilt toward him. By the time he was 12, Julian's science fair trophy gleamed on our oak dining table, with my father's hand heavy on his shoulder, saying, "Julian's got the Callahan mind for greatness. He'll conquer the world." At 8, I clutched my watercolor of a sunset, its colors bold and raw, while my mother's distracted smile, that sweet Nora, stung more than silence, her eyes already on Julian's victory. That smile wasn't malicious. Rather, it was a pattern, a quiet decree that his accomplishments were goldmine mere copper. Julian learned to use this dynamic early on. At 9, during a family game of Monopoly, I outsmarted him securing Boardwalk. His accidental nudge sent the board crashing, pieces scattering like my pride. "Nora is upset because she's losing." He deceived our parents with a smooth and silky voice. Their belief in him was instantaneous. My protests drowned in their chorus of comfort for him, and I was sent to my room, tears burning, while Julian smirked, whispering, "You'll never win at anything real." His competitiveness extended beyond games. When I won a school art contest at the age of 11, my painting, a storm-tossed sea, was shown at a local gallery. Julian, then 15, couldn't handle the attention shift. At the ceremony, he revealed his math Olympiad score, evoking gasps and my parents' beaming pride. My certificate felt weightless in my hands. Later in my room, he leaned against the doorframe and said, "Nobody cares about art, Nora. It's not a talent like numbers." His words were a blade piercing my heart. Nevertheless, the following morning, I painted again, a ship fending off the storm. My defiance, a silent rebellion against his dismissal. My mother's words, although kind, were a mirror reflecting my lower status. "Julian knows his path." She would sigh when I wavered between passions. "Try to be more like him." While I celebrated my 14th birthday with a simple sketchbook, Julian celebrated his 18th birthday with a sleek laptop symbolizing his future in finance. When I begged for writing classes at 15, my father scowled. "Focus on something practical, Nora." However, when Julian joined the investment club, they bought him a tailored suit. After I blew out the candles, Julian announced his early acceptance to Wharton. The room erupted, and I sat with my fork tracing patterns in the icing, invisible in my moment. Later, by myself, I drew a girl fading into mist, her edges dissolving. That drawing became my anchor, a reminder of the self I refused to let disappear. One memory sticks out the most. My birthday dinner at 16 was a quiet affair with my chocolate cake and uneven frosting. When I was 17, I won a regional art competition, and the prize was a scholarship to a summer intensive. The ceremony coincided with Julian's debate championship, and my parents chose him. Their absence left a lasting wound. My teacher, Ms. Lena Marquez, stood in her voice ringing as my name was called. "Nora, your work speaks truths. Others only dream," she said. Her belief ignited my resolve to disprove my family, not with their approval, but with my own unwavering truth. By the end of high school, Julian was the Callahan legend, and his journey to Wharton was a family story. Meanwhile, I struggled to defend my desire to attend art school, saying that the arts are a gamble, and salaries are thin, and my mother said, "We want you secure, dear." Their doubt was a forge tempering my ambition, and I applied to Rhode Island School of Design, my portfolio a quiet roar of defiance. When I was accepted, my parents' anxious looks spoke louder than congratulations. Julian's farewell party was a celebration complete with balloons that read, "Future Tycoon," and a cake shaped like a stock ticker. And my departure 2 years later was a footnote. My dorm crammed with items from thrift stores, their advice to budget wisely, a sting of their uneven faith. The gap grew in college. Julian's Wharton years were a string of prestigious internships funded by our parents who furnished his apartment with leather and mahogany, and I worked 20 hours a week at a campus cafe, my hands stained with charcoal and espresso to pay for my supplies. At RISD, I found my tribe creatives who valued ideas over money and who saw beauty in chaos, and digital design became my passion, bridging the gap between art and utility. One winter break, Julian came home with a Rolex on his wrist. "A mentor's gift," he said while I clutched a sketchpad purchased with tips. Our parents' pride in him was a symphony, my progress a faint hum. With champagne flowing and his signing bonus on display, the family dinner was a coronation when Julian got a job at Goldman Sachs after graduation. "This covers it," he smiled, ordering a vintage bottle. 6 months later, I graduated and took a junior position at a Boston design studio. My mother asked, "Will your salary cover your loans?" Julian's new BMW was shining in the driveway on Thanksgiving, and his presents to our parents, a sapphire pair for Mom and a Patek Philippe for Dad, were so much better than my handmade picture book. Couldn't afford genuine things, huh? His snicker was like a dagger in my heart as he murmured. By my mid-20s, Julian's high-rise condo overlooked Boston Harbor, and I shared a Somerville walk-up with him. I budgeted every penny, and on his 30th birthday, which was a spectacle at a rooftop club with black tie required, I stretched my credit card for a dress only to have him greet me with, "You could have tried harder, Nora." At Christmas, he boasted, "My bonus is more than your salary," which made my parents silent and caused the room to laugh nervously. That evening, I heard my mother ask Julian, "Could you find Nora a job at Goldman? Would you consider crafting advertisements?" His scathing response was, "Mom, they hire elite talent. Nora wouldn't cut it." The comments burned, but they also fueled a fire, a determination to establish my own value in my own light rather than in his shadow. I carved out a life in the gritty corners of Boston, my Somerville apartment. A patchwork of thrift store chairs and flickering bulbs, while Julian's high-rise gleamed like a beacon of triumph. Each family gathering was a stage for his conquests. New cars, new deals, new boasts, while my quiet victories were buried beneath his shadow. However, within me, a spark grew fueled by the sting of dismissal, tempered by a resolve to prove my worth, not to them, but to the Nora who painted storms and refused to fade. My first job at Luminos Studio was a fragile foothold, a small design firm where I created logos and web interfaces for local businesses. The pay was low, barely covering rent and loans, but the work was a lifeline. I dedicated myself to every project, staying late, to perfect gradients and sketching wireframes on napkins during lunch. My coworkers, a motley crew of creatives, became my adopted family. Maya Ruiz, a coder with a thunderous laugh, taught me HTML over cheap beer. And our director Leo Carter saw my hunger and gave me bigger projects, saying, "You've got a rare eye, Nora." His words a salve against my family's key. However, the economy took a drastic turn, leading to the closure of small studios such as ours. One gray Friday, Leo called us into the conference room, his face etched with sorrow. "We're closing next week," he said, his voice breaking. I fought, but the numbers won. The air left my lungs, my savings a thin shield against the impending storm. I applied to 72 jobs in a month, and my portfolio was polished to a shine. However, the market was a battlefield, flooded with designers more experienced than I was. 3 interviews produced nothing but courteous rejections and the statement, "We need someone with deeper experience," as my bank account drained. In desperation, I overcame my pride and reached out to my parents. "We'll help," my mother said in a warm but worried voice. "Talk to Julian. He understands money," he said, his smugness ablaze over the phone. "I told you art's a luxury," he said, his smugness ablaze. "When times get tough, people ditch the pretty stuff," he said when he invited me to dinner at his country club, where wealth hung like chandeliers. When I arrived, my best blouse felt like rags among the tailored suits. Julian ordered a $300 bottle of wine, hardly looking at me. "Time for a real job, Nora," he said, leaning back. "I could pay your rent, but I'd need to see a budget. Make sure you're not wasting it on paints." His offer was a leash, not a lifeline. I declined, my voice tight. "I'll manage." His shrug was dismissive. The next family meal was a public trial, and when my mother brought up the fact that I had lost my job, Julian grabbed the opportunity to lecture. He was only 4 years older than me, and he explained his stock portfolio with my parents listening intently and me shrinking under their scrutiny as I pushed peas across my plate. At the age of 27, I faced the ultimate defeat when my lease ended and was forced to return to my childhood bedroom. The walls still covered in my teenage sketches mocked me, and my parents tried to ease the pain, but their disappointment was a quiet hum. "Julian's thriving," my mother said once, her voice wistful. "Maybe he can guide you." The contrast was stark. Julian's new condo was a palace of marble and glass, while mine was a time capsule of dashed hopes. His tour of the condo was an emperor's parade. His BMW purred in the driveway, and he boasted about having 3 bedrooms, a wine cellar, and concierge service. Then his gaze fixed on me, he remarked, "The HOA fees probably more than your old salary, Nora." And I smiled. My teeth clenched, my hands aching for a sketch pad to capture the arrogance in his jaw. On a rainy Tuesday, surrounded by past due notices, I reached my lowest point and considered giving up. Perhaps Julian was right. Perhaps I should apply for bank jobs, swap my brushes for spreadsheets, and accept his most recent offer, an assistant position at a friend's firm. But with conditions, mediocre pay. "But you can't be picky," he said. "Dress properly and check in with me on your spending." It was less help than control, and I admit his path was the only one. However, upon examining my portfolio that night, logos, posters, and interfaces, all integral parts of my soul, a shift occurred. I was fighting not for money, but for the girl who painted ships that could withstand storms, and for Nora, who believed that art could transform the world. Julian's success was measured in dollars, but mine could be an impact in creating what others couldn't imagine. At 3 in the morning, I realized that there was a lack of design tools. Platforms were either too complicated for beginners or too simple for experts. What if I developed an application that would bridge this disparity? It would be simple, yet powerful, a canvas for all creatives. My pulse was pounding with purpose as I drew wireframes until morning, which I named Artisan Flow. We met in my parents' garage, our whiteboard a map of dreams, and I presented the idea to Maya over coffee. Her eyes lit up and she said, "I'm in." We brought in Leo, who is currently freelancing, and his UX expertise was a perfect fit. User interviews revealed pain points. Designers craved simplicity without sacrificing anything. My family noticed the change and asked, "What's this project?" Julian heard a call and sneered, "Software," my mother said with a kind grin. I didn't fight. I worked, and we bootstrapped with my final funds, coffee-fueled evenings turning into days. "You can't code, Nora. Stick to making things lovely." As I was explaining Artisan Flow to his colleagues at a family barbecue, Julian interrupted saying, "Nora's playing startup now. Last month it was freelance, and next it'll be poetry." His laughter stung his colleagues' laughter sounded like a chorus of doubt, and I fled to the bathroom, tears hot but returned with a forced smile, my resolve hardening. Our first investor pitch was a disaster. A venture capitalist, Julian's colleague, barely looked at our deck and said, "Design tools are dead, and your team is too green." 3 more rejections followed, each one a devastating blow to our shaky hope. Leo's network made the breakthrough. His former boss, Carla Vega, ran a creative tech incubator. She invited us to pitch at their showcase, warning that there were no guarantees, but that our idea would solve real problems. Elise Monroe, a former designer who is now an angel investor, was among the audience. Her questions were incisive, asking about our vision, our market fit, and what makes us unique. She asked and I answered honestly, saying, "We're designers first, building for creatives, not engineers. We know their soul." 2 weeks later, Elise offered $200,000 for a fair equity stake. The deposit hit my account, and I sobbed in my car, not out of relief, but because of the weight of the possibility. We rented a small office, hired a back-end coder, and worked tirelessly. I kept my family in the dark, tired of Julian's jabs. Making progress. I would say when asked, while we built a beta that attracted 600 users in a week. Feedback poured in, with one person writing, "This is what we've needed." Our user base grew, and each feature was a step toward stability. At Thanksgiving, Julian boasted about his bonus, and I nodded silently, tallying Artisan Flow's revenue, which was now a whisper of his wealth. By Christmas, we secured $1.5 million. In a second round, the documents signed days before Julian's engagement gala. I moved through those months with a quiet ferocity, my team and I creating a platform that began to hum with life. Its users, a chorus of creatives who saw what I saw, a world where art and innovation could dance as equals. However, Julian's towering presence shadowed each step forward, his voice a drumbeat that drowned my own. The gala loomed a stage where his triumph would peak, but I was no longer the Nora who faded. My truth was a river carving stone, and soon it would reshape the land between us. Our beta launch was a momentous event. 600 users grew to 2,000 in a month, and their feedback served as a roadmap for our next steps. Maya worked late into the night, coding her algorithms, weaving magic into our interface, and Leo refined user flows, his insight turning friction into flow. Our new coder, Amir Hassan, brought a backend that scaled like a skyscraper. I led with a vision that felt like destiny, juggling investor calls and design meetings, my voice becoming more confident with each pitch. At our office, a small loft with exposed brick and dreams, we celebrated milestones with pizza and hope. "We're on to something big." Maya said, her eyes bright, and I nodded, my heart swelling. But I kept my family at bay. Their doubts a burden I couldn't bear. Julian's engagement to Sophia, the heiress to a shipping dynasty, was a coronation. Her family's wealth was as old as Boston's cobblestones, and their Martha's Vineyard estate was a legend whispered at country clubs. My mother spoke of her with pride, saying, "Sophia's perfect for Julian." The unspoken comparison stingingly dismissed my own brief relationships, rooted in shared passions, as unserious. Julian called one Tuesday, his tone clipped. "The gala's at the Harborview Ballroom, black tie. Don't wear anything weird, Nora. Sophia's family doesn't do artistic." His words were a leash, demanding that I shrink to fit his narrative. My mother's follow-up call was softer, but no less heavy. "Please come, honey, it'd break my heart if you weren't there, and wear something elegant, not, you know." The growth of Artisan Flow, meanwhile, was a quiet rebellion. When a mid-sized agency, Horizon Creative, adopted our platform, their director, Lila Chen, praised its impact, writing in a case study that reverberated throughout the industry. "We've cut design time by a third." Our monthly revenue doubled, then tripled, surpassing a threshold that made Julian's bonuses seem less legendary. I immersed myself in business journals, mastering the language of profit and scale, while my nights were consumed by spreadsheets and sketches. At a tech conference, I presented Artisan Flow to a small crowd, and their applause was a validation Julian could never give. However, I remained silent at family dinners, avoiding Julian's questions by saying, "It's going fine." While my team closed a $14 million Series A, Round the valuation, a figure that felt like a dream. Novatech, a Fortune 500 company, signed a deal to use Artisan Flow across their global marketing teams in the spring. The deal was worth more than Julian's yearly salary, but I celebrated with my team in our loft, rather than at home. "This is just the start," Leo said, holding up a soda can. My parents noticed that I was working late, and my father once asked me, "Is work picking up?" I grinned and said, "Keeping busy," as I signed the paperwork to relocate our office to a downtown tower. Our logo would soon shine in the lobby, and Tech Innovator magazine had us with my picture next to the headline, "Artisan Flow Redefines Creative Tech." I kept the news under my bed because I wasn't prepared for my family's response. Then came the call that changed everything. Claudia Reyes, CEO of Luminary Labs, a titan in creative technology, asked for a dinner in Boston over lobster at a restaurant by the harbor. She leaned forward and said in a low voice, "Artisan Flow's doing what we've chased for a decade. We want to acquire you." The individual she introduced captivated me with a 9-figure offer that had the potential to transform my life. She offered me a position as Chief Creative Officer with the freedom to scale our vision. We signed the preliminary agreement a week later and scheduled the announcement for the week after Julian's gala. The timing was a twist of fate, and my secret was a blade I hadn't intended to wield. Julian's invitations arrived embossed in gold. His note said, "Black tie optional, but dress appropriately, Nora." I smiled, the irony sharp. That afternoon, I purchased a midnight blue gown, its elegance a quiet defiance, not flashy, but undeniable. As I paid, Julian texted, "Don't talk about money or your startup. Sophia's dad finds it crass. Be on time." His words solidified my resolve. I had intended to share my news in private after the announcement, but his condescension sparked something deeper. It wasn't retaliation, but a need to reclaim my story, to stand in my truth. A sleek box containing the embargoed press release and my new Luminary Labs business card with the Chief Creative Officer embossed in silver was my prepared gift. The note read, "Different paths, different summits. Congrats on your engagement." I tucked it into my clutch, not sure if I would give it, but prepared for the occasion. The drumbeat of the gala approached, and my team sensed my tension. "You okay, boss?" I nodded in response to Maya's question. "Just family stuff." But my thoughts were like a battlefield, with Julian's words replaying, "You'll never win at anything real." I glanced at our office where our logo was shining and said, "You're wrong." The weeks leading up to the gala were tense, with Luminary Labs lawyers swarming our office, due diligence proceeding relentlessly, and me spearheading integration talks. My parents' pressure increased, and they said things like, "Julian's worked so hard for this. Sophia's family could secure his future, and she's the woman we always hoped he'd find." Their words were a mirror reflecting my lesser place, and I nodded and smiled as I signed documents that valued Artisan Flow at a sum that could buy Julian's condo twice over. The announcement loomed, my secret, a weight I carried alone, and the gala would be Julian's stage, but I was no longer a shadow. My flame was rising, and soon it would light the sky. The Harbor View Ballroom shimmered like a dream, woven from starlight, with chandeliers casting prisms across white orchids and polished marble, a stage set for Julian's triumph. I entered that world with my midnight blue gown as quiet armor and my heart as a drumbeat of resolve. The air was thick with wealth and ambition, with Boston's elite swirling in tailored suits and silk, their laughter a melody of power. However, beneath my calm a storm gathered, not of retribution, but of truth, a river ready to carve its own path through the stone of my brother's story. Tonight I would not fade. Tonight I would stand as Nora, the woman who created a world where art and innovation reigned. My parents greeted me near the entrance, their relief palpable. "You look lovely, dear," my mother whispered, adjusting my necklace. "So appropriate." My father nodded, his eyes already searching for Julian. "He's with Sophia's father, making connections." The pride in his voice was a familiar ache, a reminder of the pedestal Julian occupied. With a smile on my face, I clutched the silver box, its contents a secret that ignited like a coal in my palm. the maitre d' checked my name with a flicker of surprise. It was like navigating a river of glass through the crowd. Julian's coworkers gave him hazy grins and dismissive hellos, saying things like, "Nora, right, you do stuff like graphics. You clean up well, Nora." He said, his eyes appraising, "Almost didn't recognize you without your sketchbook." His laugh was a blade cloaked in charm, and the crowd laughed along, oblivious to the sting. One asked, his gaze shifting to a more lucrative conversation. I nodded, unfazed, my worth no longer tied to their approval. Sophia appeared resplendent in a gown that shimmered like moonlight. Her air kiss was a practiced gesture. The evening was Julian's masterpiece. He conducted the room like a conductor, each interaction a note in his symphony of status. When I joined a conversation about design trends, he redirected it, saying, "Nora's got a little online project hobby stuff, but let's hear about your merger, Tom." His words were a leash, drawing attention back to his orbit. I sipped my champagne, my smile a mask, but inside the river surged. At dinner, seated among his colleagues, I answered questions about artisan flow, but Julian interrupted, saying, "Enough about Nora's side gig. Could you please share some insights about that IPO, Sarah?" Despite the pattern of erasing my contributions dating back to our childhood, each slight bolstered my resolve. The toasts started with a stream of praise for Julian and Sophia. Her father, a titan of industry, spoke of shared legacies, his voice rumbling with authority. My father then followed his words thick with emotion, saying, "Julian's always been our pride, a man who seizes every chance." Colleagues praised Julian's deals and drive their anecdotes, a tapestry of his greatness. Then Julian rose, flute raised, his presence commanding the silent room. "This night is about journeys," he began, his voice smooth as velvet. "Some climb the peaks of opportunity, building empires, shaping futures." His gaze swept the crowd, landing on me with a flickering smirk. "Others wander, chasing dreams that never quite land, waiting for success to find them." The room tittered, uncertain if it was a joke, but Julian's eyes held mine, his meaning clear. My mother's expression was one of entreaty, while my father's was one of avoidance. The gift box in my handbag was now a burden, a weapon I hadn't intended to draw. But Julian's words were a gauntlet, a public carving of my life as lesser. I stood, my legs steady as old trees, and I walked to the center of the room. Conversations were hushed, eyes curious, and Julian's expression changed from annoyance to unease as I got closer. "For the groom," I said, my voice as clear as a bell, offering the silver box, a small engagement gift. His surprise was a crack in his armor. He expected a trinket, something to make fun of behind closed doors. "Open it now," I urged, my tone gentle but firm. "It's relevant." Intrigued, he complied, playing to the crowd with a theatrical flourish. "Let's see Nora's latest creation." The press release with the stark headline, "Luminary Labs acquires artisan flow in historic deal," was revealed when the box opened. My title, Chief Creative Officer, shone below. Julian's face froze, his eyes searching the page in shock and recognition. The color drained from him and then surged back, and Sophia leaned in, asking, "What is it, darling?" Her voice was piercing with interest, but he was unable to respond. The paper was shaking in his hands, so I grabbed it carefully and turned to face the crowd. "I apologize for interrupting," I said, my voice a torrent. "But since Julian mentioned paths, I'd like to share mine. Next week, Luminary Labs will announce their acquisition of Artisan Flow, the company I founded 3 years ago. It's a platform that empowers creatives worldwide, used in 27 countries, valued at a sum that, well, let's say it's substantial." A gasp went through the crowd, and Julian's colleagues exchanged shocked looks. "I didn't plan to share this tonight." I continued, looking into Julian's eyes. "This is your celebration, Julian and Sophia. But your toast invited a broader truth, that success isn't one path. It's many, built on vision, grit, and heart." I raised my glass to different journeys and the courage to walk them true. The room erupted. "Hear, hear." Applause erupting like a tsunami, glasses clinking. Julian regained his composure and stepped forward with a strained smile. "Always a surprise, my sister," he said, his voice forced. "I've always backed her, ventures even advised her early on." The lie was bold, but I smiled. Funny, I don't recall that. Though I do remember you saying design was hobby stuff, not a real career. Then there was a shift in the air as his colleagues laughed sharply. Sophia's father stood up, his presence commanding. "Remarkable, Ms. Callahan," he said, holding out his hand. "We should discuss your platform. Our firm needs modern design tools." He led me aside, Julian, watching his face a mask of shock as his future father-in-law courted my expertise. With expressions of amazement and regret, my parents approached and inquired, "Why didn't you inform us?" My father's voice cracked as he said, "I didn't understand your work, Nora. I should have trusted you saw something I couldn't." His words were a bridge, fragile but real. The room buzzed with executives pressing business cards into my hand and Sophia's mother inviting me to her cultural board. I moved through it all with grace, my heart a wildfire of validation, not for their applause, but for the Nora who'd built her life from ashes. My mother whispered, her voice small, "We thought you were struggling." And I met her eyes. "You planned this. You stole my night," Julian said in a low voice as he cornered me by the coat check as midnight approached. I shook my head and said I intended to tell you privately after the announcement. Your toast changed my mind. It wasn't about upstaging you, Julian. It was about truth. His eyes flickered, anger softening to something raw, and he asked, "Is it really that big?" He inquired, his curiosity piercing. "Bigger than I dreamed," I replied. "But it turns out that hobby stuff changes the world." He managed a nod. "Congrats, I guess. Though your timing," I grinned. "Different paths, different moments. Thank you, and truly congratulations." For a brief moment, I saw the brother I'd once admired, his armor cracking, but the night wasn't his anymore, it was mine. This is the story of how I, Nora, rebuilt not just a company, but a family, a legacy and a vision that would outlast us all. After Julian's gala, a new world emerged, revealing my truth, like a mountain shattering through clouds. The weight of years lifted not because I had dimmed my brother's light, but because I had claimed my own, a fire that burned steadily and true. In the weeks that followed, Artisan Flow's acquisition by Luminary Labs reverberated throughout the industry, transforming my name from a whisper to a beacon. The news of Luminary Labs' bold move. Artisan Flow's $900 million deal broke like a thunderstorm with headlines in Tech Innovator and Forbes. My phone was ringing with messages from mentors, colleagues, and even distant cousins who had once thrown me off at holiday tables. My team celebrated in our new downtown office, which had floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Boston skyline. Maya raised a glass of sparkling cider, and Leo and Amir cheered, their faces ablaze with pride. I grinned, my heart full, but my mind kept going to my family. Their silence a question mark in the storm of praise. My parents called first, their voices shaking across the line. "We're so proud, Nora." My mother said, "We didn't know. We should have seen." My father's voice was quieter, full of regret. "I never understood your path, but you've built something I can't fathom. I'm sorry for doubting you." Their words were a balm soothing wounds I'd carried since childhood. I invited them to the office, wanting them to see the world I'd created. They arrived amazed by the glowing logo in the lobby and the buzz of our team at work. "This is yours." "And it's just the beginning," my father said, touching a framed trophy, and I nodded. For the first time, their delight was for me, unhindered by Julian's radiance. Julian responded more slowly, like a shadow moving across the sun. 3 days after the gala, he showed up at my office without warning, standing in the reception area like a man lost in a foreign land. "Your assistant's fierce," he said with a half smile that broke his uneasiness. Wouldn't let me pass without clearance. I led him into my corner office where the walls were lined with design sketches and patents, evidence of a vision he had once called a hobby. He took in the view and the accolades, his silence more audible than his boasts. "Nice setup," he said, "not what I pictured for you." I offered coffee, sensing his struggle to find his footing. "We outgrew beanbags," I teased, echoing his gala quip. He laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in years. "I pushed you because I thought it'd make you tougher," Julian said, avoiding my eyes. I didn't realize how much it hurt. His words were a crack in the armor he'd worn since we were kids. "Your way cut deep," I replied, my voice steady but kind. "But it forged me, so Maybe I owe you a strange thanks. He looked at me, then surprise softening his edges. Only you'd find a silver lining in having a jerk for a brother. We both laughed, the tension easing like a river finding its course. The weeks that followed were a tapestry of growth and reckoning. At Luminary Labs, I took on the role of Chief Creative Officer. Claudia Reyes, a mentor who saw my vision as a cornerstone of their future, expressed confidence in me by saying, "Your creativity is our edge." We expanded Artisan Flow and integrated it into global workflows, resulting in tens of thousands of users. I started a mentorship program called Creative Currents for artists and designers, making the transition to entrepreneurship. Each session was a mirror of my own journey, a chance to uplift those who had been told their dreams were too fragile. One mentee, a young painter named Aisha, echoed my past. "My family says art won't pay, but I feel it's my purpose." I gave her a scholarship to our program, thinking of Ms. Lena Marquez, whose belief had once saved me. The dynamic of my family changed, slowly moving toward equilibrium, and Sunday dinners turned into a stage where my parents discussed Julian's deals and Artisan Flow's newest features. My mother once remarked, "Our daughter, the tech pioneer," with a pride that she had previously reserved for her son. Julian's inquiries became sincere, such as, "How do you scale user retention? Your story is inspiring, Nora. Let's work together on a charity event," he said over coffee, his interest a bridge we crossed together. Sophia, who was now his fiancée, invited me to lunch, her friendliness tinged with strategy. I accepted, feeling her reassessment and her respect stemming from my newfound prominence. 6 months later, at a seaside estate, Julian and Sophia's wedding was a spectacle. Its opulence a headline in Boston's society pages, and I stood as a guest, not a shadow, my gown a quiet echo of my gala defiance. Julian's toast at the reception surprised me. "To my sister Nora," he said, finding me in the crowd. "She showed me success isn't one road, but a web of paths, each valid, each vital." His voice faltered, displaying a vulnerability I had never seen before, and the crowd cheered, my eyes stinging not for the pain of the past but for the possibility of a new bond. After that, he found me by the bar and said I meant it. "I'm still learning." I nodded. "We both are." The moment was flawed, layered with history, but it was ours. I invested my wealth in making a difference. I named a scholarship at RISD for underrepresented creatives after Ms. Marquez and invited her to the ceremony. Her tears during the unveiling of the plaque symbolized a completed journey. I expressed to her, "You ignited my passion, and we are now illuminating others." At Luminary Labs, I promoted diversity in tech by hiring voices from marginalized communities and adding accessibility tools to Artisan Flow's platform to ensure no creator was left behind. My team grew to 50 members, a family united by vision rather than blood. Maya became CTO. Leo was our UX chief, and Demir was the lead architect. Their faith in me was a foundation stronger than any I had ever known. A year after the acquisition, I hosted the first summit of Creative Currents, which brought together 500 designers, coders, and dreamers. I told them about my journey not as a story of retaliation, but of perseverance. "True wealth," I said, "is creating what only you can, aligning heart with impact." The standing ovation was a wave. But what made me happy was Aisha's subsequent statement, "You showed me I'm enough." Julian and I had dinner together at home, a rare evening with just the two of us. He talked about starting a family with Sophia, his voice reflective, saying, "I want my kids to value more than money. I want to see paths like yours." He raised his glass to different roads and the courage to walk them. I clinked mine against his, to family redefined. The horizon widened, my life no longer a shadow but a constellation. My parents and I forged an honest and strong bond through quiet conversations and shared meals. Julian and I became siblings rather than rivals, our paths parallel but different. Artisan Flow's legacy was global, its tools shaping art from Tokyo to Nairobi, and I stood on my office balcony with the city below, a canvas of light, and felt not vindication, but verification. I'd built this not for their eyes, but because it was my truth, a fire that would burn long after I was gone. The girl who painted storms had become a creator of worlds, her value a star that no shadow could dim. I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. If this story resonates with you or reminds you of your own journey, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing real, inspiring life experiences together. Don't hesitate to share this video with someone who might need a little encouragement, a reason to keep pursuing their own path, even if it's different from the rest. And always remember, success isn't about being better than others. It's about having the courage to live fully in your own light and to let that light brighten the world around you.